At 6:30 in the morning, a janitor cleaning the courtyard of a luxury apartment complex in Beijing noticed something that did not belong there. A body, motionless, broken, and already surrounded by blood. The man lay at the base of a towering residential building in the Chaoyang district, a place known for its privacy, its security, and its wealthy residents. At that hour, the city was only beginning to wake. The air carried the sharp chill of early autumn. There were no screams, no witnesses rushing forward, only the quiet realization that something irreversible had happened during the night. Within minutes, police sealed off the area. Identification was found in the victim's pocket, and the name spread faster than the flashing lights reflected off the glass walls above. Yu Menglong, 37 years old, one of the most promising actors of his generation. A man whose face was familiar to millions, whose career appeared to be entering a long-awaited resurgence. Official statements came quickly. A fall, a tragic accident, possibly self-inflicted. But the scene itself did not agree. Marks were visible on the wall of the first floor, roughly 1.5 meters above the ground. Scratches, dragged lines in the paint, clear impressions where fingers had pressed and slipped. According to forensic specialists, a person who jumps does not claw upward as gravity takes hold. Instinct does not drive the hands to grip concrete in a controlled descent. These were not the marks of surrender. They were the marks of resistance. Above, on the 5th floor, investigators entered the apartment believed to be the point of origin. The curtains by the window bore a clean horizontal cut, approximately 30 centimeters long, too precise to be accidental, too deliberate to ignore. Even more unsettling was what was missing: dust. While neighboring units showed the dull film left by weeks of seasonal wind, this section of fabric appeared recently disturbed, as if touched, or opened, or used. And then there was what they found on his body. Inside Yu Menglong's pocket were 2 luxury watches, both Rolex, one Daytona, one Submariner. Together, their value exceeded what many earn in years. Friends, colleagues, even his own mother would later confirm that such items were entirely out of character. He lived simply. He avoided excess. He trusted his finances to family. These watches did not belong to him. From that moment on, the narrative began to fracture. News outlets flooded the scene. Social media erupted. Fans demanded answers. Yet from the very first hour of the investigation, a tension emerged between what was being said publicly and what the evidence was quietly suggesting. This was not merely the demise of a celebrity. It was the collapse of a carefully maintained image, an image of safety, of order, of rules that were never meant to be questioned. Because in the world Yu Menglong inhabited, success did not come without expectations. Loyalty was demanded, silence was rewarded, and those who refused to play by unwritten rules often found themselves isolated long before they were destroyed. As we examine the details of that night, one truth becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. What happened beneath that building was not the beginning of the tragedy. It was the final act. By the time daylight fully reached the courtyard, investigators were already uneasy. What they were seeing did not align with what they were expected to conclude. Yu Menglong's body lay several meters away from the building, positioned in a way that immediately raised questions. Falls from height usually tell a consistent story. Gravity does not improvise. Bodies descend in predictable arcs. But this scene resisted simplicity. The distance from the wall was irregular, the posture unnatural, and the marks on the structure itself refused to be ignored. On the outer wall of the first floor, approximately 1.5 meters above ground level, investigators documented multiple scratch marks. The paint had been stripped away in narrow lines, exposing rough concrete beneath. Embedded within those lines were partial fingerprints, smeared and uneven, as if someone had tried desperately to hold on. According to forensic reconstruction, a voluntary fall does not produce this pattern. When a person jumps, the body accelerates downward almost immediately. The hands instinctively move toward the head, not outward to search for friction. There is no time to grip, no opportunity to claw. These marks suggested something else entirely, a moment of resistance, or a struggle that continued even after gravity took control. The contradiction deepened as attention shifted upward. The 5th floor apartment, registered under the name of screenwriter J. Guang, was identified as the likely point from which the fall occurred. Inside, Nothing appeared overturned. No obvious signs of chaos. At first glance, the space looked almost staged in its calm. But investigators know that violence does not always announce itself through disorder. Sometimes it hides in what is too clean. The window facing the courtyard was partially covered by curtains. On closer inspection, a horizontal cut was discovered across the fabric, roughly 30 centimeters in length. The edges were clean, precise, consistent with a sharp blade. This was not tearing caused by wind or accidental damage. It was intentional. Even more troubling was the condition of the curtain itself. While other units in the building showed a visible layer of dust from the dry autumn winds common in Beijing during that season, this section was noticeably different. The fabric was clean, recently disturbed, as if it had been opened, closed, or adjusted not long before the incident. Investigators documented the detail carefully. Curtains are rarely cut without purpose, and when they are, it usually means someone needed access without leaving the window fully exposed. Then came the discovery that shifted the investigation from suspicion to disbelief. During the examination of Yu Menglong's personal effects, officers found 2 wristwatches in his pocket. Both were authenticated as genuine Rolex models, a Daytona valued at over 100,000 yuan, and a Submariner estimated at approximately 80,000 yuan. Together, they represented a level of luxury completely inconsistent with the victim's known lifestyle. Colleagues described Yu Menglong as restrained, even cautious. In public appearances, he favored modest attire, simple watches, no visible indulgence. His mother later confirmed that he had never owned such items. According to her, her son entrusted his earnings to family management and lived well below his means. So why were these watches with him? The question lingered until independent online investigators began connecting fragments that official channels had not yet addressed. Archived social media posts belonging to J. Guang resurfaced. In January of the same year, he had shared an image of a Rolex Daytona with the caption, "Happy New Year's gift." Months later, in March, another post appeared. A Rolex Submariner, a gift from a friend. Thank you for your kindness. By May, both watches appeared together in a single photograph, tagged with a location in the Chaoyang district. The resemblance was not approximate. It was exact. Serial numbers were not publicly released, but visual comparison left little room for doubt. The watches found on Yu Menglong were identical to those displayed online months earlier by the apartment's tenant. How they moved from one man's possession to another, and why they were placed inside the victim's pocket, remained unanswered. By this point, the narrative of a tragic fall was already collapsing under its own weight. The wall marks suggested resistance. The cut curtain implied preparation. The watches introduced the possibility of staging, and none of it explained motive. What kind of accident requires props? What kind of fall leaves evidence of hesitation, struggle, and misplaced luxury? As investigators awaited the results of the autopsy, one conclusion quietly took shape among those closest to the case. Whatever happened to Yu Menglong, it did not begin at the window. It began earlier, and the body was about to reveal what the scene could not. When the autopsy report was delivered, it did not arrive as a single revelation. It unfolded slowly, line by line, dismantling every remaining assumption that Yu Menglong's demise had been accidental. The first anomaly was chemical. Toxicology results revealed an alcohol concentration in his blood far exceeding what witnesses had described. The level measured approximately 2.4 per milli, nearly 3 times higher than what would be expected from moderate drinking. At this concentration, alcohol alone can induce severe disorientation, impaired motor control, and in some cases, alcohol poisoning. Yet every account from that night told a different story. Multiple guests at the penthouse party stated that Yu Menglong consumed no more than 2 or 3 glasses of wine over several hours. He appeared lucid, calm, fully in control of his speech and movements. One close friend recalled a brief conversation shortly before 11 in the evening, describing him as clear-minded and focused. There were no visible signs of intoxication, no slurred words, no loss of balance. This contradiction forced investigators to look deeper. The second finding was far more disturbing. In the contents of Yu Menglong's stomach and intestinal tract, forensic analysts identified traces of a powerful sedative. Initially difficult to classify, Further testing confirmed it was a fast-acting sleeping agent capable of inducing unconsciousness within 15 to 20 minutes. The quantity detected exceeded the threshold necessary to incapacitate an adult male. This was not accidental ingestion. The substance was not prescribed to him. There was no medical record indicating prior use. Combined with the elevated alcohol level, the sedative created a dangerous cocktail, one that could render a person defenseless in a short window of time. That window matched the timeline described by witnesses. Around 11 in the evening, Yu Menglong accepted a glass of whiskey offered to him. He was initially reluctant, according to several guests. He had expressed concern about maintaining physical discipline for an upcoming role, but after polite insistence, he accepted the drink. Approximately 15 minutes later, people nearby began noticing changes. His speech slowed, his gaze unfocused. He appeared dizzy, as though struggling to remain upright. From that point on, his movements became fragmented in the collective memory of the room. The autopsy continued. Bruising was discovered on the neck and shoulders. Oval-shaped contusions, consistent in size with adult human hands. These were not superficial marks caused by impact during a fall. Their coloration and depth indicated they were inflicted between 30 minutes and 2 hours before demise. The pattern suggested forceful gripping, sustained pressure, a physical confrontation. Additional abrasions were found on his arms and hands, defensive injuries, scratches that aligned with attempts to push away or break free. Under his fingernails, forensic technicians recovered skin cells and traces of blood belonging to another individual. The body told a story that no witness had seen. Yu Menglong had regained partial consciousness. He had resisted. He had fought, according to independent forensic specialist Dr. Wang Haimeng. These combined findings directly contradicted any theory of suicide. A person who intends to end their life does not exhibit defensive injuries, he noted. They do not show signs of restraint, sedation, and struggle within the same time frame. The implication was unavoidable. Before the fall, there was violence. Before the impact, there was a crime. As these details leaked into public discourse through unofficial channels, the tone of the investigation shifted. What had been described as a personal tragedy now bore the hallmarks of a carefully constructed scenario. Sedation to eliminate resistance, physical force to control movement, and ultimately, a fall engineered to appear voluntary. The placement of the body, the timing of demise, the absence of clear witnesses, each element suggested calculation rather than chaos. Still, one question remained unanswered. Who had the opportunity to administer the sedative? The drug required proximity, trust, a moment where refusal would seem impolite rather than protective. It had to be delivered in a social setting, disguised within something ordinary. A drink, a gesture of courtesy. Attention inevitably returned to the final hours of the party. Witnesses recalled that after Yu Menglong began showing signs of disorientation, he was escorted away from the main gathering, a private room, a place to rest. During this same period, 2 other individuals were notably absent from the common areas. The host of the party, and a woman whose public image was defined by innocence and youth. What happened behind that closed door was not recorded by cameras. No audio, no official transcript. But the evidence embedded in Yu Menglong's body suggested that the night did not end quietly. It escalated. It turned physical. And at some point, someone decided that silence was the only acceptable outcome. By the time his body reached the ground, the damage had already been done. The fall was not the cause of the tragedy. It was the cover, which means the real crime did not happen on the ground below. It happened hours earlier, behind a closed door, during a private party. To understand what happened to Yu Menglong, investigators were forced to reconstruct a night that no one wanted to remember in full. The gathering began shortly before 9 in the evening at a penthouse overlooking the Chaoyang skyline. 17 guests arrived over the course of an hour, all familiar faces within the Chinese entertainment industry. Actors, writers, producers, people accustomed to privacy and discretion. Officially, it was a casual celebration. Unofficially, it carried purpose. According to multiple sources, Yu Menglong had been invited under the premise of discussing a future film project. A conversation, an opportunity, nothing that suggested danger. He arrived on time, dressed simply, wearing a dark suit without embellishment. Those who spoke with him that night described him as calm, polite, and reserved. He ate lightly. He drank sparingly. He remained cautious. From 8:15 until approximately 10:30, the atmosphere remained controlled. Conversations flowed quietly. Laughter was measured. Yu Menglong stayed mostly with younger actors, speaking about craft rather than ambition. At one point, he mentioned the importance of discipline. He was preparing for a role. He needed to protect his body, his mind. Shortly after 10:30, Irene Song arrived. Her presence shifted the room in ways that were subtle but noticeable. Dressed in white, with minimal makeup, she embodied the image that had defined her public persona for years. Youthful, gentle, harmless. She greeted several guests before taking a seat near Yu Menglong. Their conversation appeared cordial, nothing overt, nothing alarming. Around 11, witnesses observed Irene offering Yu Menglong a glass of whiskey. At first, he declined. He gestured politely. He reiterated his earlier concerns. But according to accounts from those nearby, the offer was repeated, framed as a gesture of gratitude, a simple courtesy. Eventually, he accepted. It was a small decision, and it would prove irreversible. Within 15 to 20 minutes, changes became apparent. His posture slackened. His speech slowed. His eyes struggled to focus. Those closest to him noticed confusion replacing clarity. He attempted to stand, then hesitated. Someone suggested he rest. A private room was offered. From approximately 11:30 onward, Yu Menglong was no longer visible to most of the guests. During this same window of time, 2 other absences went largely unquestioned. Irene Song was not seen in the main area. Neither was the host of the party, J. Guang. When a guest later asked Irene where Yu Menglong was, she reportedly responded with concern. She said he was sleeping, that it was better not to disturb him. Her tone was calm, almost caring, but no one else entered the room. What happened behind that closed door was never officially recorded. There were no surveillance cameras inside the private quarters, no audio, no direct witnesses willing to speak publicly. What remains is inference and motive. Yu Menglong was known within the industry as an anomaly. He resisted informal arrangements. He refused to comply with expectations that had little to do with talent and everything to do with submission. For years, this resistance had cost him opportunities. Projects vanished. Roles were reassigned. His career stalled. By early 2025, that began to change. He had completed work on a major production valued in the billions of yuan. Another project was scheduled for broadcast on national television. His return threatened a quiet balance. Success without compliance is dangerous in systems built on control. It invites others to question the price of obedience. According to an anonymous source who claimed to be present that night, the events were not spontaneous. They were planned. The invitation, the setting, the choice of participants, even the role assigned to each individual. Irene Song, with her unblemished image, was the least likely to be suspected. Trust was her weapon. The sedative ensured compliance. The isolation removed witnesses. And when Yu Menglong regained awareness, the situation escalated. The forensic evidence suggests he resisted. Bruises on his neck indicated restraint. Scratches on his arms showed struggle. He fought not only against individuals, but against the realization of what was being taken from him. Dignity, control, choice. In that moment, the objective shifted. According to the reconstruction proposed by independent analysts, the decision was made to end the situation permanently. A fall could erase the context. A fall could erase consent. A fall could become an explanation that required no further answers. When Yu Menglong's body struck the ground hours later, the story was already prepared. Tragic, sudden, unfortunate. The kind of ending that allows institutions to move on without consequence. In the days that followed, Irene Song remained silent. Her projects were suspended. Endorsements withdrawn. Her public presence collapsed without a single statement. Guang vanished entirely. His apartment was sealed. Neighbors reported his last sighting days after the incident. Authorities declined to confirm whether he had left the city or the country. No formal charges were filed. What remained was absence, silence, and a narrative, carefully maintained. But the evidence told a different story. One of coercion, of punishment, of a system enforcing its will through fear and erasure. Yu Menglong did not fall because he was weak. He fell because he refused to kneel. When he tried to fight back, the system responded in the only way it knows how: silence him and make it look like he chose to fall. In the weeks that followed Yu Menglong's demise, the investigation entered a familiar phase, one where questions multiplied, but answers slowed. No official suspect was named. No arrest was made. Statements became increasingly cautious, carefully worded to acknowledge public concern without committing to conclusions. Behind the scenes, the consequences unfolded unevenly. One man disappeared entirely. Wisdag. Guangguang's apartment remained sealed, his whereabouts unconfirmed. Rumors spread that he had left Beijing. Others claimed he had already crossed national borders. Authorities neither confirmed nor denied any version. Silence, once again, proved effective. Another figure remained visible, but diminished. Irene Song's career collapsed in stages. Film projects were suspended. Brand endorsements withdrawn. Streaming platforms quietly removed her work from circulation. Her management convened emergency meetings with legal counsel, yet no formal defense was offered to the public. No denial, no explanation. According to individuals close to her, she withdrew from contact. She ate little, slept less, and repeated the same question to those who reached her: why is this happening to me? But in the absence of charges, consequence does not equal accountability. The system continued to function. For Yu Menglong's family, the waiting became a second punishment. They were left with fragments of truth and a growing awareness that justice, when confronted by power, does not arrive on schedule. Files were classified, details withheld. Each request for clarity met with procedural delay. Public attention eventually shifted, as it always does. New scandals emerged. New faces replaced old ones. But for those who followed the evidence closely, one conclusion remained impossible to ignore. This was not a random act of violence. It was a message. Yu Menglong had built his career without submission. He had refused informal arrangements. He had rejected expectations that demanded silence in exchange for success. And when his return threatened to expose that refusal as viable, the response was decisive. Make an example. The final narrative presented to the world described a tragic fall, a moment of personal crisis, an unfortunate end. But beneath that narrative lies a darker reality, one where consent was removed chemically, where resistance was met with force, where a human being became an obstacle to be eliminated rather than a voice to be heard. We are often told that truth emerges with time, that justice, though delayed, remains inevitable. But cases like this challenge that belief. They force us to confront the uncomfortable possibility that some truths are buried not because they are unknown, but because they are inconvenient. The question, then, is no longer limited to Yu Menglong. How many others have been silenced quietly? How many careers redirected? How many warnings delivered without headlines? His demise stands as a reminder that integrity carries a cost in environments built on control, and that sometimes the most dangerous act is not rebellion, but refusal. The question is no longer how Yu Menglong demise. The real question is how many more will have to fall before the system is forced to change.